Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start this panel discussion of Bridge Forum, called Bridge Forum 25. It is a series of panel discussions, online and sometimes on-site, that started 3 years ago, in March 2022, with the support of Regional Cooperation Council, and then by different organizations we have been supported. This very panel is funded by Open Society Foundation, and also this activity is due very importantly to the cooperation of IESEC, which is an international association of students. It is an organization committed to intercultural dialogue, and they are mostly our public, our audience. Therefore, at the end, of course, because of this, it's natural that one of our main topics is youth. In this panel discussion today, it is focused on youth activism, which is essential, which is crucial, I think, for the society as a whole, society in general. And panel discussion, this topic, so the youth activism, which will be seen it will be approached in relation to the education with the values of humanism, which is so namely on principles of peace, democracy, the well-being of the society, not merely I mean by this not merely material well-being, but well-being in general, also cultural, spiritual. And for this panel, the two panelists are Bora Mema, who is an activist and also a member of the political party Levizia Basc, which means movement together, a new left-wing political party in Albania. And she has been dealing and focusing on such areas like preserving public space, environment protection, women's rights, labor rights, and therefore she has been committed in the organization of trade unions, various trade unions in Albania. She has been active in the movement, student movement, in 2018, 2019, which was a powerful movement, one of the biggest in the last decades, I would say. Also participated in global campaigns against big corporations and multinationals like Amazon, for instance. And she is also a strategic researcher on an international level, research department of Unite the Union in London. The other panelist is also an outstanding participant. She is an outstanding activist. She's an activist of civil society, Dafina Pesi. She has been Secretary General and still is Secretary General since 2014 of the Albanian National Youth Congress, and which aims to amplify the voices of young people in the society. She has participated in key projects such as Tirana European Youth Capital in 2022. And also she has international activity in, for instance, Europe Summit for Young Leaders, have been participating, and has also a lot of experience in training youth for activism and public policy. After the panelists will make their presentation, there'll be a discussion, questions and answers with the audience. I'll leave the floor first to Davina. Please, Davina.
Thank you, Mr. Shehu. Do you listen to me?
Yes, I listen to you perfectly.
Great. Thank you for the invitation. Dear Bora and distinguished colleagues and young leaders, it's my honor to stand before you today and discuss a theme which it's not only relevant and crucial for shaping the future of our societies, but I think it's becoming more and more prominent, the necessity to interconnect the humanism and education as a baseline for activism and healthy societies. As we all know, humanism is a philosophical stance, and it places human dignity, personal development, and ethical responsibility at the core of education. It affirms that individuals are inherited good and have free will and the potential to better themselves and the world around them. So humanist education values holistic growth, creativity, critical thinking, and emotional well-being alongside knowledge and acquisition. Historically, humanistic principles have shaped Albanian intellectual tradition. Figures such as Pjetër Bogdani, Sami Frashëri, and Fanoli has championed enlightenment, national identity, and democratic values. Their writings emphasize the importance of education and critical inquiry, civic responsibility as a foundation for progressive approach towards Albanian society and openness towards the European family and values. However, Albania's journey within humanism faced a dramatic change and setback during dictatorship, 1946-1999, and the totalitarian regime of Enver Hoxha sought absolute ideological control, eliminating the independent thought and did not align with the state propaganda. Education was transformed into a tool rather than enlightenment, suppressing creativity, free speech, democratic engagement. Intellectuals, writers, and educators who dared to challenge the regime were persecuted, imprisoned, or exiled. The communist system dismantled centuries of humanistic progress, replacing open dialogue with rigid dogma. Literature, philosophy, civic education were manipulated to reinforce absolute loyalty to the party, eroding the values of critical thinking and individual expressions. These disruptions had long-term consequences, creating a generational gap in Albanians' intellectual and democratic development. With the fall of communism in early 1990s, let's say for almost 10 first years, it was quite difficult situation and unclear how the socioeconomic and political perspective of the country will go, in which direction. Albania embarked on a difficult but essential journey towards restoring these humanistic values that had lost for nearly half of a century. The transition to democracy required rebuilding an educational system which fosters independent thinking, civic engagement, and ethical responsibility. Today, Albanians youth play a crucial role in reviving the intellectual and moral principles that once defined our nation. Education is the seed, as we all know, but activism is the action to bring transformation. When young people are educated with humanistic values, they are naturally become active citizens, committed to shaping their communities and influencing policies that affect their lives. By coincidence, I am today in Brussels, and the core topic that we have been discussing for 3 days in a row is how European societies, which do belong to developed states already, are also facing lack of critical thinking, lack of proper space for young people to grow and cherish and live a life with well-being and not only professional development, but also personal development and growth. And it looks like things are so much interconnected that it's very difficult to try to analyze things in vacuum. Raising authoritarian regimes all across European countries is affecting especially the civic space, civic education, civic participation, and strong civil societies. And speaking here about this difficulty, it's becoming more and more difficult to reach out young people and to make them interested in being active and participating. Hello. Young activists have led in initiatives to combat corruption, promote environmental sustainability, and advocate for gender equality and strengthen civic participation. However, their potential remains underutilized due to limited resources and lack of institutional support and insufficient representation in decision-making processes. It is essential that we create more space for young people, but on the other side, we must not neglect the direction that our political elites are taking and the general discourse in policy making. Nevertheless, what remains our main objective as civil society organizations is to first of all encourage critical thinking, something that it was damaged for decades in a row. Schools and universities should not just be placed as passive learning, but should also simulate debate, independent thinking, and problem-solving skills. Secondly, what we try to do in everyday, daily based, is to promote active citizenship. Civic education should be cornerstone of the curriculum, preparing young people to take responsibility for their communities and for what they think it is right. Thirdly, it's to support more and more youth-led initiatives. We know that youth are a marginalized groups. 10 years, let's say, of youth from 18 up to 30 are those years when you have the most of the energy, you have the most of the passion, but on the other side, you are not economically sustainable, you are dependent from the family, or etc., and you still have not found your place properly in the professional spectrum or society as such, which makes you fragile, and also your activism is being put into question marks, especially for countries such as Albania or Southeast European countries where democracies are still in development and do have a lot of problems. Fourthly, I would say bridge the gap between theory and practice. Education should include practical experiences such as volunteering, internships, participation in democratic processes, simulations, and more concrete projects which make young people feel, let's say, upgraded, but also valued in the society. And the last, but not the least, encourage inclusive education, ensuring education that is accessible to all, regardless of gender, socioeconomic background, geopolitical location, or fundamental to an equitable society. So basically what we face nowadays in Albania is that there is a huge gap between urban and rural or disadvantaged or disconnected areas. The lack of interaction, the lack of opportunities, the lack of public spaces, the lack of capacities and funding opportunities are making these differences more and more, let's say, prominent. This also indicates in the willingness of young people to migrate in Tirana as the capital city, which I would say not in the all cases is the best scenario, because we should work and keep in mind that Albania needs to be developed in 12 regions and not only in the capital city. Opportunities have to be ensured in localities, and people need to be encouraged to build their local communities and feel proud and valuable where they are. Of course, migration, it's also a personal choice, but I think in this case, in Albanian case, it's not a personal choice anymore. It's becoming a national issue, and I think a national strategy needs to be put on place in regard of that. As young people in Albania today, we bear the responsibility to reclaim and revitalize the values that our intellectual predecessors promoted. That means advocating for an education system that fosters independent thought, creativity, and democratic engagement, promoting cultural and historical awareness, ensuring that new generations understand Albania's rich humanist legacy and challenges that they faced during authoritarian rules and regimes, If we do not understand how things went, we will most probably repeat the same mistakes, and create and support platforms of youth-led initiatives in education, public discourse, and policy making. In Albania, we have a generation of young people eager to contribute to national and global development. I have been working 12 years in this field with a lot of difficulties, a lot of barriers, a lot of misunderstandings and misplaced discourses. But on the other side, I can say 100% sure that we still have a vital youth, and young people do have not only a spirit, but also capacity. It's our responsibility as civil society actors, but not only to unleash that capacity and to make sure that we are getting the best of it as a nation in the right direction, always. I think we must work together, government, institutions, civil society, and international partners. I believe in the co-governance principle. I think it's very important and not exercised enough in Albania. Educational policies need to be strengthened, absolutely, and education and activism must go hand in hand to create a generation that it's not only informed, but also is committed to positive change. In closing, I urge all of us to reflect on immense potential of young people when provided with quality in education and rooted with humanistic values. I think by fostering the educational system and prioritizing critical thinking, civic engagement, and ethical leadership, we are not only investing in individuals, but also in the future of our societies. It is to be, let's say, a little bit shaken on what is going on around us in the regional level. I think we don't have so much indifference with countries such as Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina and Montenegro and North Macedonia when it comes to trembling democracies and the need of the society to exercise pluralism. On the other side, we also are facing the necessity to join a huge family, which is the European Union, as the best ally we could ever have, based on geopolitics, but not only. And we as young people are in between this, to go out in streets and protest, or to do our best to apply the co-governance principle and take the most from the system and improve the system from inside. I don't want to take any more minutes than that. I'm looking forward to the discussion and questions, which I am pretty sure will enrich this debate. Once again, I'm very thankful to the opportunity of speaking with you and sharing these thoughts with you, and looking forward to my colleague for the other part of the intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dafina, for your brilliant and holistic presentation. I would just highlight two things from what you said. The one is about critical thinking, which is crucial. The education with critical thinking and how you related it with school, with education. So this is the main thing I would say. The other maybe is the activism, youth activism, is important for the society in general, because this is one of the possible motivations for the people not to leave the country. It is something that is happening also in the area around Albania, in the region, as you mentioned, the countries that you mentioned. But this is not the civic engagement is not the only, the activism is not the only motivation to stay, but it's one of the possible, I think. Now, I leave the floor to Bora Mema, and then we'll have a discussion.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Bashkim, for the invitation. And also, it was very interesting to listen to Dafina's presentation and her comments and opinions. And so without further ado, I won't spend a lot of time, since she also mentioned the humanistic values, mostly on the Albanian figure. So I'll give more a historical perspective somehow on when was the split between humanities, social science, and natural sciences historically, and how this change and this shift has impacted us today. Uh, a lot of people usually don't recall that probably before the Industrial Revolution, before the rise and the growth of capitalism, usually the humanities and the natural sciences were considered the common knowledge, holistic, universal knowledge. For example, philosophers like Aristotle, who deal with empirical world and also with human behavior. But after the Industrial Revolution, since it was a mode of production that it was oriented towards efficiency and technical and utilitarian knowledge, this split between sciences focused on nature and technology and the humanities focused on human culture, history, and philosophy started to shift, which also created this kind of division that knowledge was not holistic anymore, and where science and arts and philosophy were one. But we tried to have a priority towards sciences that are considered more efficient, more practical, and considering the humanities such as literature, history, and philosophy as less practical. And unfortunately, it's something that we see even today in the modern times, that studying human behavior is not, or humanities is not considered that relevant for development, which also brings another topic on what development really is. Is it about economic growth only, or it also considers other aspects of human life and ethics, empathy, and human values? So the to cut it short, like during the Industrial Revolution, we have, although we have this major technological and economical growth, we also it's important to have the humanities to start and discuss and study human behavior, ethics, and social structures, such as labor exploitation, inequality, environmental degradation. And it's very important for social science and humanities to have this to to tackle these issues, which we also are facing today as part of the global challenges. But the Industrial Revolution, it was not the only historical period during the two world wars, and until the fall of the authoritarian far right regimes, usually mostly, sorry, in the Western Europe and the United States, we have this rise of the welfare system, where most of the people of the working class families, which could never dream of going to the university, we have the massivization of universities, where and not only that, due to the high pressure from what was happening in the Soviet Union, we see the social concessions that the ruling classes are giving to the working people, to the common people. So for the first time, we have leisure time, something which was not considered. And it was not common before Second World War for people to go to the beach. It's a very new culture, as we are probably, it might come as a surprise to us, but only after the Second World War people were massively going to the beaches. And that's related to the fact that people have leisure time, that people can afford to have more time to develop themselves and to have social connections. And it's not a coincidence that during these times we have the rise of the different subcultures of different kind of music that was becoming more and more popular. We have the youth movements, we have the civil rights movements, we have the civil rights movements, not only about racial, feminism, LGBT rights. We have the massive students movements which had their moment in May of '68 in France, in UK, Western Europe, the United States. There were these movements which were led by the youth, which were not only asking rights about themselves, not only for the youth to be part of different policies and so on, but they were raising systematic questions like inequality, globalization, why there is this inequality between North and Global South. They were anti-war movements. So for the first time, probably we have this kind of international movements, peace movements, which demand not only rights for themselves as different groups or categories, but imagine a young man or a young woman in France going to protest for a post-colonial country in Africa or in Algeria, or the youth in the United States protesting against the war in Vietnam. So we have this massive movements, which was one of the I think one of the most emancipatory moments in the history of the world. What happens after this period? Neoliberalism happens. And what is neoliberalism? It's an economic political ideology that emerged in the late 20th century, which tries to reduce the state intervention in the economy. It's trying to transfer public assets to private ownership, emphasizes personal accountability over collective welfare, and values efficiency, productivity, profitability above all else. And neoliberalism has also reshaped education, treating it as a commodity rather than a public good. And this shift, of course, has profound implication for the humanities and social sciences. Because neoliberalism frames education as a market transaction where students are consumers and degrees are products. Fields like business, technology, the STEM are prioritized because they are seen as directly contributing to economic growth. The humanities and social sciences, which focus on critical thinking, ethics, cultural understanding, are deemed less marketable and face funding cuts. Neoliberalism, of course, favors practical, skill-based education that align with corporate needs, and humanities, which encourage questions of power structures, power dynamics, societal norms, are seen as irrelevant or subversive. For example, which corporation might be interested to fund programs like philosophy, art, literature, because they don't bring any profit. On the other hand, they raise the critical thinking about power imbalances in the society and inequalities. Also, there is quite problematic the fact that humanities are they cannot be measured by quantitative measures on what's the graduation rates in the market or job placements. The long-term effects of the need of the humanities, not in the labor market but in the society, are very difficult to be measured, and they are quite in the long term. And this happens, of course, because neoliberalism wants to focus on prioritizes profit and economic growth, and neoliberal governments and institutions view the humanities and social sciences not just as useless when it comes to economic growth and productivity and profit, but also because they are threats to raising critical thinking and challenges to the status quo. And as for on the one side, neoliberalism promotes individualism and consumerism, the humanities emphasize empathy and ethics. So this is also the period when the youth movement, the social movements are in a decline. And it's not a coincidence that we are firstly introduced by Margaret Thatcher and Reagan and all these neoliberal politicians, like in Chile with Augusto Pinochet, where neoliberal policies are being implemented, where students coming from working class families or families, middle class families, cannot afford to go to university anymore. They have to pay high tuition. They cannot, and it's also a reflection about class mobility. If before a student coming from a working family or from a middle class family could afford to go to the university because they used to be for free in the Western Europe and in the United States, with a high tuition and students loan, it's impossible to have also the social mobility. So we see how this is also affecting the different class structure in the society. Why is it important to have the humanistic tradition in education? Because it focuses not in the intellectual, but also in the emotional and ethical growth of individuals. It encourages questioning, analyzing, and independent thought. It fosters compassion, moral reasoning, and a sense of social responsibility. Dafina mentioned some part of the Albanian history, and unfortunately, not only after 1991, which was the first and the last glorious moment of the student movement and the youth movement. Unfortunately, during the 90s, we didn't have in the 2000s a major student uprising. And in the Albanian context, what happened is that in 2015, the so-called Socialist Party implements neoliberal policies in higher education, trying to make universities institutions that only produce and reproduce individuals who will fit to the market logic, which will be another attack towards humanities and humanity values, and also to youth activism. This is when myself and other activists of the movement I'm part of started to organize a student resistance towards this privatization reforms in higher education. Why would it be important to have the youth as part of as an agent of changing not just different movement, but also not just a different movement, but also the way how we think that education should be about. I will be. I don't know. Do I have more time? Sorry, I can speak for
Yes,
hours and I talk about this. So
you have
yeah, I
time
have a few
still.
more minutes. Okay, good.
No, you have 15 or 20 if you want, or more, but we have time.
No, I'll
Because
try.
it's
I'll try
we
not
have
to.
time until 7, you know,
Okay,
but
no, I'll try to
will
be
leave
shorter than
time
that for
at
sure.
least half an hour for discussion.
Okay, so to make it a bit more theoretical, and probably it would be better for us to discuss later this on how we do the praxis from theoretical to the practical implementation. Two philosophers and thinkers that I really appreciate, which are Antonio Gramsci and Paulo Freire, have these two very important theoretical concepts. That is the organic intellectual. Antonio Gramsci, a well-known Italian thinker of the last century, argued that every social group creates its own organic leader, intellectuals, who rise from within groups and articulate their struggles, values, and aspirations. These intellectuals are not necessarily academics, but they can also be activists, leaders, and organizers who help their communities to develop a critical consciousness and challenge dominant power and structures. So youth activists can be organic intellectuals who emerge in their communities to challenge oppression and to advocate for change. And of course, they can use their lived experience and their aspiration to raise awareness and to mobilize others. Is for Paulo Freire, which is a very important Brazilian educator and philosopher, especially in humanities. He has written this amazing, outstanding book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is a foundation text in critical pedagogy, and it has a profound influence on social justice, liberation movements, and on different methods when it comes to education. He criticizes the traditional model of education, especially in humanities, where teachers deposit knowledge to passive students. And this kind of method actually treats students as empty vessels to be filtered. And sometimes they reinforce oppressive power mentality, but also oppressive power dynamics. And he advocates for a necessity where there is a dialogue approach where teachers, students learn from each other in a collaborative process, where students and teachers engage in mutual inquiry. And this can not only necessarily be within the academia, but it can be implemented in different aspects of our collective life. It's very important because this way of teaching and of dealing with, especially with with humanities and social sciences, tackles this dynamic between oppressors and oppression, and emphasizing how groups are being dehumanized by the system of oppression. And of course, Freire emphasizes the importance of praxis, where the integration of reflection and action, because true liberation involves both critical thinking and the efforts to transform oppression and inequalities. Of course, there might be criticism about that. Is this overly idealistic or difficult to implement? But I personally believe that this is one of the only ways how we can transform the society, and how the youth can be engaged in this. I will give some personal examples from my activist experience, how in the same movements, we see people who are academics, students, professors, we see workers, we see students. But even during my student activism, we would have students coming from different backgrounds, and how important it is and how much we have learned from one another. And these are not some very nice words that we say in this kind of workshop or seminars. Sometimes I think that I personally get bored when we listen to this. Oh, we learn from one another. But seriously, when people are in the same collective efforts, we really get to learn from one another. And I personally believe that the youth, not only in Albania, but all over the world, and especially in very problematic times as such that we are living right now, with the rise of the far right in Germany, in France, with Trump in the US, and the authoritarian regimes all over the world, there is a necessity for the youth to be one of the most engaged citizens in the society, but not just as individuals, but as collectives. And one of the criticism that I have towards myself, and usually people who are in the civil society and in the student movement, and in different kind of movements, usually, I'm not trying to point fingers, but usually we are people who live in our own bubble. We go to the same trainings, we go to the same workshops, conferences, we talk to one another, we talk to the already converted ones. And I've been trying to reflect, especially from my experience when I've been organizing miners in the Buciza, which is the poorest and the most the richest underground and the poorest above it in Albania. And I have met young people who have dropped school when they've been 13 or 14, whose only hope is to migrate, to get a boat and go as illegal migrants to UK or somewhere, where the only images they are faced with is this fake models of success, like from Big Brother, or I don't know, this kind of non-real VIPs that we see in the medias, in traditional media. And there is this abandonment, not only by the state institution, but I think even from a lot of civil society organizations. And I don't think this is just an Albanian experience. Otherwise, I believe that this is one of the reasons why the far right is on the rise. They are not a minority. They are these young, desperate young people who are not being included in the daily life, in different they don't feel heard, and therefore they approach this kind of authoritarian models, or this kind of tough dudes who resonate to them more. And I think it's our responsibility, especially the youth, the responsibility who are engaged in civil society and in different kind of movements and organizations, to be more aware and to find ways to find the common language. I'll give one other example. A lot of young minors or young people in the periphery, they are sexist, they are homophobes, they are not politically correct. And the attitude that I find problematic, even within the collective I'm part with, when we first went there, was like, oh, I don't want to engage. He's a homophobe. He's a racist. He's not well. He doesn't read. He is an illiterate, and and I find that very problematic and alienating this part of the society, because they don't fit to our norms. Is what is creating this split between even the youth, not only the rest of society. So I think that the let's say the mission of our generation, but even younger, I'm not that young anymore, should be to try to find links to include and to bring on both these people, and how to find the common language, and how to be more understanding on the reasons why these people think like this, and how can we, not from a top-down position, but looking at each other in the same eye level, and try to talk and understand and try to find the common struggles, and to engage and to have a common emancipatory movement. And I think this is one of the ways how the young will play a crucial role into changing the system in Albania, a very corruptive system, but also an authoritarian and far-right on the rise hegemony that is being quite dominant, unfortunately, in the last years. And on that note, I think it's probably better if we can have a discussion. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much, Bora, for your very interesting presentation. Let me highlight one thing. It's very good that you mentioned that you put it into an international frame, into an international context. It helps, I think, to understand also the problems of the Albanian society. And let me add something in this direction, that what you mentioned about, both of you, about the shrinking of humanities in the educational system, it is a phenomenon everywhere in the world, also in the Western world, unfortunately. And this is somehow fueled from this gap or discrepancy that Dafina mentioned, um, between, on the one hand, the age, which is when people have more energy and more dreams, between 18 and 30-year-old, and the difficulties that they find nowadays, especially in the last decades, not only in Albania, but everywhere in the world, to make a living after after finishing the period of education. Now, we can go on with the discussion. We have plenty of time, 3/4 of an hour. Before starting with the question from the audience, would you have any comment between you, Dafina and Bora, of what you said?
I really appreciate Bora's intervention. I think she brought complementary to my intervention many aspects which were very needed to enrich the topic. I think it's very important how she described the liberalism, which unfortunately touched us quite late, 20th century, 21st century, but better late than never. I mean, humanistic theory was invented in 14th century by Francesco Pitarca, and it needed 6 centuries to come to us. Nevertheless, I think beside our differences in the way how we approach the system, I guess me and Bora, we agree in so many points together. And I fully believe that there is absolutely a necessity more than ever for the young people not only to be aware of the direction of the societies nowadays in Europe, but also globally, but most of all about the essence that young people can bring in the political discussions, political discourse, when political agendas are being set and where the energy, force, money, and assets that are being, let's say, invested by each of us, how would they be spent and invested for the future generations? I think it's absolutely a fair discourse. It's a fair debate which needs to be held, and young people have a place on that table. We should not forget that Albanian youngsters are almost 33% of the whole population. We, I would say, are facing huge waves of migration since 2017, which are absolutely not normal for a country in development as we are, where are a lot of opportunities to upgrade. And the specific, let's say, or specificity of this migration is that not only people with a weak economical background are leaving the country, but those which are well educated, which do have a career, which do have a family, are also considering leaving the country in a massive way. So I think this is a crucial point which need to be discussed. And let's take a look on the educational system and humanistic values that we must protect in a very, let's say, orthodox way. So in that regard, this is the only comment for now, and I would be happy to discuss further, also based on the questions coming from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Bora, any comment?
Well, I do agree with most of the input that Dafina gave, especially the issues that she raised regarding migration. I think the youngsters' migration is one of the most problematic, and it's actually not even problematic. It's a social wound that we're facing right now. And although I disagree with Dafina when it comes to the fact that there are opportunities for the young people to engage, to have opportunities here, I personally do not believe that in Albania people have a lot of opportunities. But I agree with her that there is also this tendency of even people who are well educated, or they can be more qualified to find a job, but it's quite desperate sometimes when you see all these German classes that are being open, private courses offered, and parents who sign their kids since they are 9 and 10 to learn German, so they're projecting their children to become future migrants to Germany. And so this brain drain it's quite actually quite problematic, and I agree with her that it's one of the things that are necessarily to discuss and debate. Although I personally believe that people don't only migrate for better, not only because they lack opportunities and if they only need a job, but they also need to have safety. They need to feel safe. They need to have not just a job, but have job security, or to have labor rights in the working place, to have a living wage, not only to imagine how to make the ends meet. So I believe that okay, there are a lot of theories about migration, push-pull theory, and of course it's kind of difficult to compete with the wages in Germany, for example. But I believe that if a lot of things change, the socioeconomic context will change in Albania. I believe that this brain drain will be, well, let's just say that at least we won't have a hemorrhage of doctors and ITs and well-educated people. So yeah, but I'm open to discuss later and further.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, from the audience, if there are questions. Okay, so in order to leave more time, maybe we have to think over the questions. I have one question for both of you. There is a tendency, there is a phenomenon in the last few years in Western countries, in Europe, in the United States, that among young people, they are shifting somehow, and considerably, many of them, most boys, but also girls, to far-right ideas. Maybe that has to do with the memory, about the tragical past. This phenomenon, I don't know, perhaps in Albania has not come, but possibly it will, probably it will, as it is as other phenomena of the rest of Europe or of the West have come to Albania. And this is why I consider important the education with humanistic values of the young people, because activism can be on one direction or another. It's not always positive. It's not always progressive and enlightening. So what do you think? What comment would you have to make about this question? First to you, Bora, and then Dafina.
I agree. It's why I mentioned briefly even before. I believe that usually it's because it's young men for obvious reasons. Women, although not necessarily because you are a woman, you are not sexist or you are not misogynistic or have internalized misogynia, but I believe that it's the same example that I mentioned from the Peripheria guys that I met in Bulciza, but also in other contexts that I've had to face my work in the Peripheria. But I know even during my studies in Germany, there were specific neighborhoods that, because they were so damn poor, that there were no investments in education, in youth activities, and so on. Now it's an AfD, a far-right party base in Berlin. So it's quite, I think this shows a lot. And even historically, if we think about it, where did the far right, this kind of lumpen proletariat that we study when it comes to this class division, they were actually this underclass, these underdogs that were not represented. They couldn't find a place in society. They were completely excluded by the society and the state and the possibilities. So they need to fuel somehow this inequality into a movement. Or well, it doesn't mean that because it's a movement, it's a progressive movement, as you mentioned. So I also believe that in the case education and how we can manage, how we can help out, or what's the role of the state institutions to not allow the youth people to have these crazy, dangerous ideas such as the far right ideas. Sorry, it's some sorry. So yeah, as I was mentioning, in education system, before in high school and in middle school, people used to learn sociology and philosophy, and now these texts are replaced by marketing, career education, career trainings, and I find it completely like I can't even find the word. How can you replace sociology, philosophy, more history, art history, and all these subjects that are important for our human development are replaced with technical, marketing, career-oriented classes. So I think one aspect should be to have these classes in school. And yeah, I lost track. This ring in the door completely distracted me. I apologize. So let me know if I forgot something. So
No, it's
if
okay. It's up to
in the
you to say
question, yeah,
what do you think.
things that
So
happen online. Yeah.
Dafina, would you have anything to say about my question?
Sure. It
About
is
this
a very
phenomenon?
difficult question, Mr. Shehu, and I don't have a generalized answer about that. I think there are many reasons based in different contexts. For example, in the US context, I had a trip there. I stayed for 2 months last year working for the State Department. I had the chance to follow the developments during the election campaign and talk with people from civil society, from universities, grassroots movements, politicians, academias, and I made a kind of bouquet of thoughts. The reasons why pushed, let's say, towards that decision that US citizens did are very much connected with the necessity to value the human capital within US borders more than ever. So if you go and talk with them, regular people, they would say that the war veterans were never treated proudly for what they did. They didn't take most of the promised loans. They have quite a lot of psychological issues, and that affected their family lives. And they want peace and economical growth. If you talk with business representatives, they are focused on economical growth and stability, and that's all they can say. If you talk with academia and let's say civil society experts, they were, let's say, a bit confused. They were not sure what to say, but they were not brave enough to argument in their favor. So the US context, from my feeling, from my perspective, was this diverse, and each of the groups had its own, let's say, reasons. Coming back to Europe, I think we are facing younger generations which are quite not interested in politics. They are not politically educated and very much engaged in social media, very much engaged in various ways of spending the free time, but not at all, let's say, willing to understand how politics works, to understand where do they come from in terms of political culture and what did their societies face, let's say, in the last decades. And this is an aspect related to loss of memory, as you mentioned before. It was very interesting. Last year, before the EU elections, there was a huge poll among young people conducted in every EU member state. And a very high percentage of them answered that there might be a better regime than democracy. I don't know how to comment on that, but definitely I'm sure that it doesn't come, let's say, by accident as an answer. On the other side, I'm pretty sure that those who answered might lack a proper knowledge upon the political history of Europe and what their societies faced during the First World War, Second World War, and how they built their democratic societies. How important it was, this EU project, to maintain peace, sustainability, and promote growth. In Albania, there is a different context, different reasons, absolutely. I think, and I really believe in the words of Hannah Arendt, one of my very favorite woman philosophers, who said that the banality of evil takes place in the roots of not thinking about. So sometimes when you don't have time to think, and thinking is a process, you might go very easily in a wrong direction. So being neglected in a society in development, being, let's say, prejudged, lacking opportunities. And here I want also to comment what Bora said. Personally, and this is my personal approach, I dig for opportunities. And I think it's in the responsibility of each and everyone to dig for opportunities, and where there is no opportunity, to create opportunities. I'm a personal believer of this approach. But I also agree with you that our country does not shine in giving opportunities, especially to disadvantaged people, especially to those who are somehow forgotten from the system, where they don't have an enabling infrastructure. They maybe also lack family tradition in education, in emancipation. And there is absolutely a necessity for the other actors to intervene. And if they don't do it, then the situation is hopeless. So to answer Mr. Shehu, I think that these three contexts that I described do have different reasons why people are going in the direction of the far right. I think it's a mixture. It's a mixture of very rational interests, lack of vision about the future, lack of memory of what happened before, and a kind of apathy when it comes to regulating and fixing things that do not work in a society. And to conclude with all of these, the inability to think properly is why I quoted Hannah Arendt. I think that is the point where the evil starts. The inability to have a proper thinking. Thinking is a process. Having thoughts, it's a privilege. Thoughts do not come at ease as such. It's a process behind it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dafina. Now we have a question from from the audience. Is Adi Salem, who asked to make a question. Please.
All right. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. I hope
All
the
right.
others
Thank you so
too.
much. All right. I have a couple of questions for Bora as well as Dafina. The first question that I have is, what do you think educational institutions' first step should be in ensuring that we integrate education with youth activism, as like in all regions of Albania, not just Tirana right now, and with having similar courses similar to like the internship program, but rather for youth activism be enough for now, or do you think we need to do more? I have other questions. Should I lay them out now, or would you rather answer them?
As you prefer, Bora and Dafina.
I would say we can collect the questions, and then both of us can answer where each of us feels that can give a contribution with the answer, or feels better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Another thing that Bora was mentioning is how Tirana, although is developed, other parts of the region is still lacking. With the limited resources available, what do you think should be done to incorporate other regions besides Tirana as well? Another question that I have is, what do you think the role of youth organizations should be at the moment to ensure that we install youth activism into the people that they are a part of, and what should be the focus? My final question is for Dafina, and that is, you were talking about how the youth is not interested in politics right now, and the focus is on social media and such, and they don't understand what politics is or what's going on within the world, or they don't understand SDGs. And right now, to ensure that at least some of them pay attention, the news media outlets have shifted to social media as part of their campaign to educate the youth. Do you think that's the right direction we should be going to, or is it the wrong direction? I want to ask that. That's about it. Thank you so much. I will text the questions in the chat just in case.
Thank you, Auntie Salem. Now, Dafina, please.
Okay. I'm trying to give a short answer for each of the questions, and then if there is necessity to elaborate, we can recheck maybe after Bora's answer as well. How to create an enabling environment within the educational system for activism? I can give some tips. Firstly, civic education, in my point of view, should be more elaborated as a curriculum, and not only being, let's say, adopted in a certain year, but civic education, I think, must be a crucial curriculum, at least until the 9th grade, and of course more elaborated during the high school years. And not only in theory, but also in practice. Young people need to simulate, to visit institutions, to visit stakeholders, to visit interest groups, to have a talk with them, to understand how policy processes are designed, what are the steps, and where is, let's say, the space for them, so they could work with themselves to increase their role as active citizens. Here in Albania, but also in countries which were quite affected by the Eastern philosophy of doing education, we are quite focused on theory and in subjects such as math, physics, chemistry, and so on and so forth. And this mentality has created a certain educational culture, which I think in a way or another has left some consequences in the general development of the younger generations. And I think it's a crucial momentum to rethink it and to reshape it. Human sciences are quite important as well, and if we do underestimate them, then there are going to be quite some black holes in the active citizenship or active attitude of these pupils when they become elder and more responsible for their role in the society. In regard of the development of other regions, 11 other regions, except Tirana with limited resources, what can be done? I think, first of all, there are certain institutions in local level which do not have the capacity, but do have the infrastructure to cooperate with those who have the capacity and bring concrete projects and investments in the local level. There are plenty of organizations, national and international, which are willing to give support to municipalities, to administrative units, to educational administrative units, to develop projects and programs which do not, let's say, stand in the everyday engagement of these people, of these departments, but they are eligible to develop them. They are eligible to go for it. The truth is that in 62 municipalities all across Albania, there are a lot of obstacles when it comes to developing initiatives where these institutions do need not only human resources, but also financing mechanisms. But on the other side, European Union, United Nations agencies, various international organizations which do have a focus on development countries have dedicated projects, packages in order to support this institutional development and reach out vulnerable groups in order to make the situation in local level better. What happens is that because of lack of human resources in these institutions, these funds, these mechanisms, these opportunities are not being fully absorbed. So the first thing needs to be done is to articulate this. We have a ministry in charge for the local, let's say, institutional framework development. It's to articulate the need for extra support, for a solidarity aid, for more cooperation with non-governmental organizations, which do have the capacity, knowledge, and experience to support the institutions on field, and absolutely to strengthen the dialogue with interest groups in local level. So these could be certain tips how to change a little bit the situation in other 11 regions, except the Tirana, which, of course, it's much more developed because of many reasons, even political ones. In regard of youth organizations, I think that one of the most prominent issue is the sustainability and to remind ourselves why are we founded and what's our core mission. Since there is no mechanism that guarantees, let's say, operational funds for you to exist and to fulfill your mission, youth organizations, firstly, because of lack of experience, and secondly, lack of this mechanism, are always running to survive. So all their work is project-based. And believe me, I've been working 12 years in this field. It's not an easy job. So every day you have to work with your inner capacities to adopt, to change your attitude, to check what is going on around, to write, to apply, to fail, to win, in order to keep alive your identity and the people who are working in that organization. In this case, it becomes very difficult to remind yourself, why are you founded and what is your core mission? So this cycle needs to be broken in order to make sure that we are growing sustainable organizations and well-organized groups in civil society. Other developed countries has been working for quite a long time to fix this. So basically in their yearly budgetary planning, there is a specific space to ensure the operationality and functionality of the organizations. And then whatever this organization can do beyond that, bravo. But they are not being put into question. I mean, their existence is not being put into question. Nevertheless, it doesn't mean that they are not facing also issues, even across Europe. We are a member of European Youth Forum, representing Albania youth organizations since 2022. And one of the most prominent issues being discussed in the General Assembly of the last year was the shrinking space and the lack of financial support, which of course would bring some struggle in these European organizations, but still it's not comparable with our journey as organizations. We have zero guarantee for our existence. And the fourth, the question about young people not being interested. Firstly, I need to clarify myself. I don't want to generalize it. I'm not saying that young people are not interested at all. Based on polls and questionnaires, there is a high interest from them to know how politics works. When they are asked about the system, they lack knowledge. And when they are asked if there is any other better regime than the democracy, they express that it might be. So in this case, and also beside that, there is absolutely a huge engagement of young people in social media. And it's not about, this discussion is not about to judge social media or social media access, but it's about thinking how they are using those platforms, how much they are getting from those platforms, how deep in the information they are going through those platforms, and are they using these platforms or are those platforms using them? So I think this is a social question most of all, and young people are playing the part of it. I agree with you when you say that media now, it's all over social media. And of course, because media to sustain itself needs to find new ways to thrive. And it's a business in the end of the day. But on the other side, I think it's not about if you read the news. It's about how much did you understand from the news. Firstly, who wrote it? Why? What did you get from it? And do you have a full picture? And in order to absorb it, you need a proper education. So reading the news and following the news, it's just the pitch of an iceberg. So that's my answer on it. And I don't know if it was the answer you were looking for. Thank you.
First, Bora should answer, and then I'll be back to Adi Salem whether she has something to comment on that. Please, Bora.
When it comes to the first question and the second, for me are almost somehow the same, because I don't personally believe that with limited resources much can be done beside the other regions. Not just beside Tirana, because Tirana also beside the upper middle class, the Polish central Tirana, the rest of the city doesn't offer a lot of opportunities, unfortunately, not just for the youth, but for the majority of its citizens. I personally believe that without having a deep fundamental transformation of the economic and the model of the so-called development model that we have right now, which I disagree completely, because it's not sustainable. It's a process of commodification of the public spaces, with this huge money laundry in constructing, in not just in Tirana but even in the rest of the country, of destroying the preservation area and the public spaces, natural spaces. So I believe that this kind of so-called development model, no matter how much different institutions in local levels or with projects, there is very little that they can do to change actually the real problems that usually make the youth migrate or be desperate or even embrace problematic narratives because they feel hopeless. I believe that the Albanian state, but not only the Albanian state, needs to be an industrial policy state, a state that promotes sustainable economic development, emphasizes competition among enterprises, increasing employment and productivity, and of course maintaining environmental balances. And also, it's a state that will invest in modern infrastructure that requires to connect rural areas with the nearest urban centers. So this is also a way how we can somehow decrease this huge gap of inequalities between rural areas and urban areas and Tirana, the capital, and of course even within Tirana itself, trying to have public investments in infrastructure that of course will not only be efficient when it comes to economic development, but also to other aspects of interchanging and having access in other, like in other cities. I don't know when is the last time that probably the youngster had the possibility to go to the opera or to the theater or to have access in the movies. So all these investments are quite necessarily to, I know it's something that we don't see the results very fast or quickly, but these are long-term investments that we need in the society, and of course to increase sustainable development budget, and also to have a social state. Right now in Albania, because this is where I disagree with Dafina, that people need to do their own efforts. Of course, everyone needs to do their own efforts, but in a society where people live under the poverty wage, like 25% of the people, 25% of the population in Albania lives under poverty wage. I think it's beyond what a person can actually do. So we need a social state that changes minimum wages, pensions, minimum living wage. And of course, when it comes to education, we need to build an education system that we need actually to recover in some aspects, but also to build new perspectives, to have have not just an improved infrastructure, but from promoting further techniques, qualifications, economic valuation, transforming the university and education system, and not just to have this, as I mentioned before, qualified people for the labor market, but also other important aspects in the society. The social state is supposed to provide also affordable housing, and we need and since we are living in a very corrupt system, we need the rule of law state, and not just the rule of law per se, but we also need just laws. No, we don't only need the rule of law, but we also need social justice. And to make all of this possible, because I was focusing too much on the alternatives, on how a state or a government should work according to me, but to put pressure on any kind of government or political party who is ruling, we need an active society, that engages in referendums, in local initiatives, uh, uh, a society that is organized. And by organized, I don't mean only people who are mobilized to go into protest, but people who are on their daily basis are organized in the workplace with the trade unions. I'm very I'm very into, not just because of my background in labor rights and globalization and in trade union organizing, but because I think that it's the only way how workers, because it's not that if we have workers on one side and young people on one side, young people also are working people, or they will be workers in the future. So we need decent working places so people don't migrate. We need decent working places so people don't find a reason to approach or to embrace problematic political agendas. I know it's easier said than done, but I think this is one of the ways. And when it comes to education, I don't think that it should be excluding that either we have internships or we have different kind of trainings. I think we need both. I need trainings to qualify people so they are integrated in the society, but I'm in favor of any kind of internship, not the kind of internships that usually people go and get a certificate for the sake of it, but real internships where people learn and people learn to coexist. And I personally believe that it's very important for this kind of internships where people go also to the periphery, also to other areas where they challenge themselves, they challenge their beliefs, and they also they set an example even for the other people, and it creates these bridges of communication with other youngsters in the rest of the region, and who are usually from very very poor families. Uh, so yeah, that's pretty much it. But if when it comes to the social media, although no, this is a question about Dafina, but if I can just give one comment, I don't think that social medias play a good or a bad role. They're just means of communication. There are cases when TikTok or other platforms have been used by far right or authoritarian or populist political figures, and there are also cases where social media has played a very positive and crucial role. Even the last example is a protest in Serbia, how the social media used by students and the young people are challenging the dominant traditional media narrative, which is controlled by Vucic. So I think that we should not be somehow, I find it sometimes, and also I used to be quite skeptical years ago about the role of social media. It was like probably an elitistic approach. I don't want to engage with this and so on, but I personally believe that we should be smart and use every kind of mean to approach and to talk to people. And yeah.
Thank you, Bora. So, Adisalem, do you think that your questions have been answered? Or you have some
Yes,
other comments?
absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Any other question from the audience? Seems there is no other question. So, although we had some few minutes more, but we can finish it now. First, let me thank you everybody for both the panelists and also the audience for their attention. And this will be published on YouTube and would have a much larger audience, and not only in Albania. I will try to that you reach also the link of the YouTube so that you can give it to your friends that could be interested to follow it. And we will go on. End of April, we'll have another one about youth and the media also, and the new technologies. Again, with the cooperation with ISEC. So I have no more to say for today, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation and your attention. See you again sometimes. Goodbye.